All right, so we are back in our study on angels in the spirit realm, looking at some of the things as they are in heaven and try to understand some of how the spirit world works. And last week we talked about the four living creatures of Revelation. And so the week before that we talked about cherubim. So last week we looked at the four living creatures that John talks about in the book of Revelation that are around God's throne. And we saw that the four living creatures that John saw around God's throne, they each had a different face. So one had the face of an ox, one had the face of an eagle, one had the face of a man, and one had the face of a lion. And that differed from the cherubim of Ezekiel's vision, because in Ezekiel's vision, all four of them had four faces of those. The ox, the eagle, the man, and the lion. Both of these creatures, the ones in Ezekiel and the one in Revelations, they were covered with eyes. The ones in Ezekiel's vision had 4 wings, whereas the one in Revelation had 6 wings. Living creatures in Revelations, they were talked about interacting with angels, so it was clear that they weren't angels. And they were usually talked about in association with the 24 elders. And we also looked at Isaiah's vision where he saw seraphim. And the seraphim had 6 wings, and they were covered with eyes also. But since they interacted with men, and they had to cover their faces in the presence of God, we figured they must not be the same class of creatures as the 4 living creatures. And then we looked at the camps where the Israelites stayed around the tabernacle when they were in the desert. It was 3 groups on each side, one on the east, the west, the north, and the south. And each of the 3 groups had a flag that represented it. And one of the flags was a flag of an ox, one was a flag of an eagle, one was a man, and one had the flag of a lion. So we saw that they were similar to the 4 living creatures that were around God's throne. So again, the tabernacle was a reflection of what we saw in heaven. And we also saw that some people refer to the 4 gospels as a man, an ox, a lion, and an eagle. And we looked at and saw the walls of the temple. They were decorated with pictures of cherubim and palm trees. And we saw a similar description in Revelations where we had the palm trees and the 4 living creatures. So because of that and other reasons, we concluded that the 4 living creatures were cherubim. And possibly of a different class than those in the book of Revelation. So this week, it's kind of in continuation of that. One of the things we saw, or we talked about, was that if the temple and tabernacle was a reflection of what's in heaven, why is it that and if those were cherubim, the 4 living creatures, why is it that the ark only had 2 cherubim? Where there were 4 living creatures, why weren't there 4? And so, but actually over the last week, in studying this, I came across something that talked about how that there were 2 other cherubim that were in the Holy of Holies in the temple, in addition to the ones on the ark. Yeah.
So they were just separated, is what you're saying?
Well, on the ark there were 2 that were built into the cover, but then when he had him build a temple, he built 2 big cherubim to put in the temple, in the Holy of Holies, there with the ark. And so I'll start with reading the description of those in 1 Kings 23 to 20, 1 Kings chapter 6, verses 23 to 28. It says, "For the inner sanctuary he made a pair of cherubim out of olive wood, each 10 cubits high. One wing of the first cherubim was 5 cubits long, and the other 5 cubits, 10 cubits from wingtip to wingtip. The second cherub also measured 10 cubits, for the 2 cherubim were identical in size and shape. The height of each cherub was 10 cubits. He placed the cherubim inside the innermost room of the temple. with their wings spread out. The wings of one cherub touched one wall, while the wing of the other touched the other wall, and the wings touched each other in the middle of the room. He overlaid the cherubim with gold. So these were 2 cherubim that they built and put inside of the Holy of Holies, in addition to the 2 that were on the ark. So there were 4 in the temple. There were 4 cherubim, which would reflect what was we saw in Revelation. And then I saw this, interesting, there was a picture. Somebody drew a picture depicting that.
Say I got a drawing as well, but if you got, yeah.
So I guess those were quite bigger than the ones on the ark.
Trying not to lose all of these, but right here. It's kind of got the wingtip to wall thing going there.
Yeah, I thought about that.
The second here
Can you see?
is where it's wall to wall.
So these are the 2 cherubim. Yeah, their wings should be out, I guess. But and this is the ark, the little thing there.
Yeah, the little tiny bit in the
and
middle.
there's 2 cherubim on top.
Yeah.
On there.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so there are 2 cherubim on there. So there were 4 cherubim. So it confirms that the 4 living creatures of Revelation were cherubim, because otherwise there's no mention of cherubim in heaven in the book of John, if those weren't them. Okay, so this week we're going to talk about chariots of fire.
Ooh.
Chariots of fire. And we're actually continuing talking about cherubim. So last week it turns out we talked about cherubim, and the week before cherubim. So this is our 3rd lesson on cherubim.
Okay.
So it's a lot of cherubic study.
How did you find that word, cherubic?
Oh, it just came to me just now.
Oh.
All right, so I'll start with back in Ezekiel's vision. So we'll look at Ezekiel's vision again. Ezekiel 1, verses 13 to 21. It says, the appearance of the living creatures. So in chapter 1, he describes them as living creatures. In chapter 10, he describes them as cherubim, saying these are the same ones that he saw in chapter 1. The appearance of the living creatures was like burning coals of fire, or like torches. Fire moved back and forth among the creatures. It was bright, and lightning flashed out of it. The creatures sped back and forth like flashes of lightning. So the cherubim were full of fire, like torches. As I looked at the living creatures, I saw a wheel on the ground beside each creature with its 4 faces. This was the appearance of the structure of the wheels. They sparkled like topaz, and all 4 looked alike. Each appeared to be like a wheel, made like a wheel intersecting a wheel. So it's like a wheel intersecting another wheel. As they moved, they would go in any of 4 directions the creature faced. The wheels did not change direction as the creatures went. The rims were high and awesome, and all 4 rims were full of eyes all around. When the living creatures moved, the wheels moved beside them, and when the living creatures rose from the ground, the wheels arose. Wherever the spirit would go, they would go, and the wheels would rise along with them, because the spirit of the living creature was in the wheels. When the creature moved, they also moved. When the creature stayed still, they stayed still. It's like when you move, I move, just like that. And when the creatures rose from the ground, the wheels rose along with them, because the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. All right, so we see the 4 living creatures. They looked like burning coals or fire or torches. And each of them had a wheel associated with it. And the wheel was like a wheel intersecting wheel. And neither the creatures turned as they went. So the creatures didn't turn as they went. So whatever way they were facing, even when they moved, they stayed facing where they were facing. And the wheels moved along with them. So they kind of moved all in unison. And so they moved all together like one unit. So the creatures had their arms or their wings touching. So they moved all together like one unit. Any thoughts on that or anything you notice interesting?
Yes. Verse 15, where it says, as I looked at the living creatures, I saw a wheel on the ground beside each creature with its four faces. This was the appearance and structure of the wheels. So it gave like a visual.
Yeah, so then he went on to give the other visual.
But I was a little. Oh, so they were just basically seeing how they intersected. I was confusing that.
Oh, so.
With the faces a little bit.
Oh, okay. So he, no. So yeah. So I saw a wheel on the ground beside each creature with its four faces. So each creature there was a wheel, and the wheel went all the way to the ground next to them. So then he ended that sentence. Then he started the next one. He says, "This is the appearance of the structure of the wheels."
Yes.
And so then he went on to give the appearance. They sparkled like topaz, and all four were looking like. Yeah. So he says each wheel touched the ground. And then he said, "This is the appearance of the wheels." Then he gave on to give the appearance. They sparkled like topaz, and all of them looked alike. And they all looked like a wheel intersecting another wheel. So kind of like an orb.
But it almost sounds like it's like, okay, it's four creatures, right?
Four creatures.
And then verse 17 is, as they moved, they would go in any one of the four directions the creatures faced, right?
Right.
The wheels did not change direction as their creatures went. So it sounded like, I thought the cherubim was one of four creatures, right? Or
Well, so in Ezekiel, there's four different cherubim with four faces
oh, so it's four with four faces.
Right,
Okay.
yeah. So each one has four faces.
Okay.
Yeah. So in Ezekiel, yeah, they all have four faces.
Okay.
So they differ from the one in Revelation where they had one face each.
Okay. All right. I got it. Yep.
Okay.
I was almost feeling like, how are you going to go direction of four faces, right? Like if one is going this way. And,
Oh.
right? So I got it.
So it looked like there was one on their four sides, and they would go in different directions, but they wouldn't turn as they went. So they stayed facing, no matter where they went, they would stay facing that way. And the wheels wouldn't move either. They just kind of went all together.
And
like
the
one
spirit
unit.
is what they said.
It said the spirit of the living
Living.
creatures was in the wheel, and then they said the spirit was in the living creatures. So it's, yeah, a little ambiguous as to, is it saying the Holy Spirit was in them, or the spirit, the living creature spirit was in them? But it says the living creature spirit was in the wheels.
Because the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheel.
Yeah, the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels, which is interesting to try to understand.
Okay.
So each spirit or each living creature had a wheel, and his spirit was in the wheel too. So that's why it moved whenever they move. Okay, you have Ezekiel 1:25-28.
I do. Then there came a voice from above the expanse over their heads as they stood with lowered wings. Above the expanse over their heads was what looked like a throne of sapphire, and high above on the throne was a figure like that of a man. I saw that from what appeared to be his waist up, he looked like a glowing metal as if full of fire, and that from there down he looked like fire, and brilliant light surrounded him. Like the appearance of a rainbow in the clouds of a rainy day, so was the radiance around him.
What's this after that? Or did you not?
Oh, right, I didn't finish 28. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. When I saw it, I fell face down, and I heard the voice of one speaking.
Okay, so this is kind of a continuation of the other one. So there was a vault or firmament or space between them, but then above that there was a throne. And on the throne was what a man that had the appearance of the glory of God, the glory of the Lord. So the glory of the Lord is like the actual body of the Lord. So he had the appearance of it. So whether it was God or someone that appeared like God, it's not completely clear, but most think it was actually God. So God's throne on top of, above the cherubim. And so yours says it was sapphire. Does yours say sapphire?
No, mine says like a throne of lapis lazuli.
Yeah, that's the footnote. It's like, that's another translation.
So you guys know what lapis lazuli is?
Nope.
Sapphire?
Yeah, that's.
Figured it
I assume since you're asking, it's not just sapphire, but I
Yeah,
don't
so
know.
it's a stone.
Hmm.
So it's a stone that looks like this.
Okay.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It's pretty. So this is what this throne was made of. Okay, so there was a throne above the cherubs, and it was made of that. And that's, yeah, just kind of all I wanted to get out of there. Did you have any thoughts on that or anything interesting in there?
Hmm.
It's like, how do you know the appearance of the glory of the Lord?
How do we know, or how did
Well,
he?
that's
How
what
did
it
he know?
says. Because he said he looked like a man. He thought I looked like a man.
Right.
But then he's like, well,
Looked
he
like a
called it a
man,
lot
but
of
he had
things.
fire. He was full of
Well,
fire, and he had glowing metal. His top half was glowing metal.
Right. And then there was a rainbow, right?
He had light around him, rainbow
That
light
was,
around
yeah.
him, which we see in Revelations also describing a rainbow around the throne. And yeah, so he's saying that this had the appearance of God's, the glory
So
of God.
right.
So we're not, yeah.
I thought the glory was more like a feeling, right? Not really like,
Well,
a picture, you know.
Well, the glory of God is the.
Or the glory
So it's
of
like
God.
when he told Moses, "No one can see my face and live." So his face meaning no one can see my real body and live. So the glory of the Lord is his real body. So like he appears as a cloud in some places. He appears as fire, but the glory of the Lord is him appearing in his real
Person.
his real form. So the glory of the Lord is him in his real form. And it said that, says that the glory of the Lord came between the cherubim of the ark. He would rest, come in his actual form. So Ezekiel is claiming that this is the appearance of the glory of the Lord, and it was on the throne above the cherubim. Okay, so can you get Psalms 99:1?
99. Okay. All right, come on. Yep. All right. The Lord reigns, let the nations tremble. He sits enthroned between the cherubim, like the earth shake.
Okay. So David is saying that the Lord sits enthroned.
Let the earth shake. Sorry.
Yeah, let the earth shake. So the Lord sits enthroned between the cherubim. So we know that. So now we have a picture that God's throne sits, above the cherubim here, but he also sits between the cherubim. So similar to the ark. So God's throne is between the cherubim. So that's basically what we have so far. And
So there's the ark, the two cherubim, right? We just went.
Right. So in the temple,
Yeah,
there's the ark and the two cherubim.
And then above that is God's throne, right?
Well, so the ark, the temple is so in heaven, God's throne is around the cherubim, or in this one case he was under, or he was above them, but it also says that they're around him, he's between them. So in the temple, it's a reflection of what's in heaven. So basically they made the temple to look like what's in heaven.
Yeah.
So then he comes there. So he sits between the cherubim and the temple.
Okay.
All right, so then we look at Ezekiel's second vision. So Ezekiel chapter 10, verses 9 to 13, and then verses 18 and 19. So he said, I saw beside the cherubim 4 wheels, one beside each of the cherubim. The wheels sparkled like topaz, and for their appearance, the 4 of them looked alike. Each was like a wheel intersecting a wheel. As they moved, they would go in any one of 4 directions the cherubim faced. The wheels did not turn about as the cherubim went. The cherubim went in whatever direction the head faced, without turning as they went. Their entire bodies, including their backs, their hands, and their wings, were completely full of eyes, as were the four wheels. I heard the wheels being called whirling wheels. So this is kind of a similar repeat of what he saw before. But then if we go to verse 18, he says, Then the glory of the Lord departed from over the threshold of the temple. So the glory of the Lord was in the temple now. It said, and stopped above the cherubim. So the glory of the Lord went from the temple to be above the cherubim. Then it says, while I watched, the cherubim spread their wings and rose from the ground. So the cherubim were on the ground, and the glory of God went above them. As they went, the wheels went with them. They stopped at the entrance of the east gate of the Lord's house, and the glory of God of Israel was above them. So God got out of the temple. The cherubim had went and landed on the ground. God went above the cherubim, and now the cherubim went and moved over to the east gate, and the glory of God was above them still. So what does that sound like? So you had the four cherubim with the four wheels not moving. God came above it. The four cherubim moved over here, and now God is still above them. So how did God get over there?
The Spirit
Sounds like
moved
he was
with
on a
them.
cart.
Right. So like he was on the car. So like God rode the cherubim.
Rode the cherubim, yeah.
Right. So
Well,
it sounds like God rode the cherubim.
Sure.
And so the cherubim, the four connected cherubim with the wheels and his throne, like he rode it like as a vehicle.
His chariot. Right?
His chariot.
Mm-hmm.
Chariots
Right.
of fire.
Chariot of fire. Yes.
It all comes together.
It all comes together.
Okay.
All right. So it looks like this one unit is actually a vehicle that God uses. And so now we'll look at more on that. Or any thoughts on that before we go on? Okay, you have Daniel 7:9.
I do.
Okay, this is Daniel's vision.
One of a few.
One of a few, yes. One of Daniel's vision.
As I looked, thrones were set in place, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was as white as snow. The hair of his head was white like wool. His throne was flaming with fire, and its wheels were all ablaze.
All right, so the Ancient of Days is God. So it says God's throne was a flaming fire, and all its wheels ablaze. So the God's throne had wheels. So it sounds like he's describing the same unit, the throne with the cherubim and the wheels.
Well, we discussed already that the wheels were already with fire, right?
Yeah, the wheels are covered with fire and the cherubim are with fire.
Now it's the throne included now, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the throne is a flaming fire too, right? Okay. Yeah, so it's like a chariot. And so you have 1 Chronicles 28:18.
I don't know where this begins, but
Oh,
and
yeah.
the weight of the refined gold for the altar of incense, right?
Yeah, so this is telling them how to build the temple. So these are in the instructions of how to build the temple. We kind of start in the middle of it, but yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. And the weight of the refined gold for the altar of incense. He also gave him the plan for the chariot, that is, the cherubim of gold that spread their wings and overshadowed the ark of the covenant of the Lord. Okay.
Right. So it's saying he gave him the plan for the chariot. It said that is the cherubim of gold. So it's saying that the cherubim of gold over the ark was the chariot. So they gave him the plan for the chariot. So it was described there as well as the chariot.
It's like a seat, right? A gold seat, right?
Yeah, that's where God would come rest. It's a seat, but a chariot moves as well. So it's a seat of a moving thing. let's see. Okay, so any thoughts on that? God's chariot? Have you seen that before?
God's chariot?
Yeah, or noticed that in that description before? Okay, let's see.
Oh, wait. So wait, the altar, right? Did it appear as an altar? Yeah, chariot kind of like has.
Oh, well, so this is the end. So the sentence kind of,
Okay.
the sentence before that is describing the altar,
Hmm.
and then it stops. So this verse kind of splits the description of the altar and the description of the chariot and cherubim
Okay.
for some reason.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's heavens. And
Second Samuel.
so you have 2 Samuel 22, 10 and 11.
Yep. Starting at 10. He parted the heavens and came down. Dark clouds were under his feet. He mounted the cherubim and flew. He soared on the wings of the wind.
All right, so that's talking about God. So he flew, he mounted the cherubim and flew. So there again, it's talking about God flying on the cherubim and mounting them, kind of like you would talk about a horse. But he mounted the cherubim and flew. So we're seeing the cherubim are also used as a method of transportation
Yeah.
for God. Let's see. So you have Ezekiel. So Ezekiel, now we'll go back to the beginning part of Ezekiel's vision. So we're going backwards a little bit, but just to kind of set another context of the four creatures. So this is before he describes the four creatures. He talks about how they came, what was happening before they came out, before he saw them, what was going on.
Oh.
So Ezekiel 1, 4 through 6.
Okay. I looked and I saw a windstorm coming out of the north. An immense cloud was flashing lightning and surrounded by brilliant light. The center of the fire looked like glowing metal, and in the fire was what looked like 4 living creatures. In appearance their form was human, but each of them had 4 faces and 4 wings. Their legs, oh, sorry.
All right, so they saw that there was a whirlwind or windstorm that appeared, and then they came out. So he saw something that was a great cloud with fire flashing continually and bright light around it. And in the midst of it, he saw something that looked like glowing metal. So that's what he saw first. He saw a whirlwind, and he sees flashing lightning and fire coming out, and something that looks like glowing metal in the midst of the fire. And then within that, now he sees the 4 living creatures, which are the cherubim. So this is how his vision starts. So he sees the whirlwind of fire, he sees lightning, and then the 4 living creatures come out. So it all started with the whirlwind. And let's see, you have Isaiah 66:15.
Right by the end. See, the Lord is coming with fire, and his chariots are like a whirlwind. He will bring down his anger with fury and his rebuke with flames of fire.
Okay, so this is talking about the second coming of Jesus. So again, it says his chariots are like a whirlwind.
Mm-hmm.
So it's confirming that the cherubim are chariots, or that the whole apparatus, and it comes like the whirlwind. So when you see it, there's a whirlwind with it. So when God's chariot is there, there's a whirlwind with the chariot. So it's
But a whirlwind is like a noise, right? It's like, or just like a spiral of wind.
Yeah, I think it's like a spiral of wind, or kind of a storm, tornado. Maybe not tornado.
No.
A storm.
column of air moving rapidly around and around in a cylindrical funnel shape.
Okay, so there's like a
Yeah.
tornado. So it's a funnel-shaped column of wind. Okay, the whirlwind. So his chariot is in a funnel-shaped column of wind.
Tornado is like a synonym. It's a synonym of that.
Okay.
Tornado, a hurricane, a typhoon, a cyclone, vortex, twister, or a dust devil. Okay.
So this is what his chariot is seen in. Okay. And then Psalms 68, 17 says, oh, you have that one?
Yes.
Okay.
This time. 17. The chariots of gods are tens of thousands and thousands of thousands. The Lord has come from Sinai into his sanctuary.
Okay. So now we have understanding that the cherubim are the chariots of God, or the cherubim with the wheels, and the throne or the chariot, and that there's thousands and thousands of these chariots. And that God rides upon it. So God rode there on the cherubim, and God, we saw at the temple in the second vision, he went from one part of the temple to the other on the cherubim. And so we previously saw in Jacob's dream, we did a study on Jacob, and we saw that the ladder was a gateway from heaven to earth. Jacob's ladder. We talked about that being a gateway. And they said angels were ascending and descending on the ladder. So angels use the ladder as a means to get from heaven to earth and back. And then we also looked and we saw that Jesus said, he said, you'll see greater things than this. You'll see angels ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. So then we talked about how Jesus ascended, and now he's going to be a gateway from heaven and earth. So he said angels will be ascending and descending on the Son of Man. So, but now we see that God ascends and descends riding on this chariot, or the cherubim, and his throne chariot. So since he uses the cherubim, he rides on them to get from heaven to earth, then we could also consider that, the chariot, as a gateway between heaven and earth. So the chariot is another gateway or method of going between heaven and earth. So it's kind of another gateway. And so let's take a look at the Jacob description again. Genesis 28:12.
Yep. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth, with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it.
All right. So we saw that it talks about a stairway. It was resting on the earth. And then its top was reaching to heaven. So part of it was touching earth, and its top was reaching to heaven. And so that's kind of a common description we've seen when it talks about gateways. And if we look at Ezekiel 1:15, you mentioned it. It says, "As I looked in the living creatures, I saw a wheel on the ground besides each creature." So one of the wheel was touching the ground, but the top was above the firmament. So the throne was going to heaven. So part of the vehicle was on earth, and part of it was in heaven. So it was kind of another description. So the chariots are another gateway, another way of moving between heaven and earth. So there's Jacob's ladder, there's Jesus, and there's the chariot. Any thoughts on that?
The It's got to be pretty scary if God's coming in on a chariot, you know.
With the whirlwind.
Yeah, and said earlier, you know, and then they will lay this, the fire would lay the sin for those, the sin upon them, right?
Oh yeah, that was at a bad time. That was the second coming.
Yeah.
That was after. Yeah, he was coming for judgment then.
Mm-hmm.
What are you thinking?
I'm actually reading other bits here, but on this, it's like this stairway isn't really for us,
Right.
but Jesus kind of is. It's like the same kind of thing, but not. But
Yeah, that's a good
like,
point.
because I remember we were talking several weeks ago about
Right,
the
right.
priesthood, like Jesus being the high priest,
Right,
that gets
right.
our prayers up.
Yeah.
It's like, is this another one of those? Like now we have access to this stairway-ish, sort of.
With Jesus or with
With
chariot?
Jesus.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
not with the cherubim. No, I don't think I want to ride a cherub. That seems a little bit scary.
Right. So yeah, with Jesus we have
Yeah.
access to, right. So we talked about, Jesus is our gateway
Yeah.
to have access to God. So that at Jacob's ladder, the bottom was on the earth, the top was in heaven, and
yeah.
God was at the top,
Mhm.
talking about. So it was basically the access to God. So Jesus is our gateway. We have access to God now through it, in that sense. So heaven is wherever God is. So we have access to get. Well, but then the ladder, right, is access to God, but it's also access to from our natural realm to the spirit realm.
Mm.
So, in the chariot would be the same. And so, Jesus would be the same as well.
Yeah.
So, would you want to ride a chariot?
I'm not interested. But
You see,
no, I'm not interested in that. I'll leave that up to God. But when you think about you're talking about the forms of transportation, right? And how we've got airplanes, and we've got trains that run on fire. We've got space shuttles, right? That actually are levitated by fire and wings.
Oh, fire. Okay,
and all
yeah,
of that.
yeah.
It kind of seems like how we've kind of our intelligence, right? Where it comes from.
Right.
To hear from the Bible sense and hear how human beings are, how creative we are.
Right.
It's like, well, where did we get all that? The coals, right? That's how there's coals.
Yeah.
Makes a train engine and make it run. Another way of
Actually, yeah, because he
transportation.
described them as coals, and at that time they didn't use coals for transportation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but now we do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah. So that's
Just some thinking.
yeah,
Sorry.
that's true. So do you guys think that people could ride on these chariots?
I wouldn't want to find out.
You would want to find
Like,
out.
I don't think that's a.
Well, there were thousands of chariots. So my question is,
Who are the rest of them
who
for?
who else needs a chariot, right? Like,
That's
He
a
has
good
a lot
point.
of spares. I mean,
I know.
Well,
maybe one's broken. No,
or it could be,
that's not.
or it could be the other angels or beings needed
That's true.
to get here,
Yeah,
to get from their realm to this realm.
the angels of God were ascending and descending on it.
Yeah, they were
Like, there's more than
sitting on
one.
the ladder, right?
Well, maybe.
So
Yeah.
maybe they need a chariot.
Maybe. But do they get a cherubim?
Well, the chariots, the cherubim come with the chariot.
That's all. So there's thousands of cherubims too?
Yeah, well, apparently there's 4,000s of 4,000s of cherubim.
Oh, okay.
Because for each.
For each, right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But he says he mounted the cherubim, so I don't know if he could just ride one or not. But the chariots had, 4. All right, so let's talk about riding the chariot. This is where it gets interesting. All right. So 2 Kings chapter 2. We'll start with verse 1.
Did you do Ezekiel 1:15?
Yes.
Oh, we did.
Yes.
That's the intersecting of will. Okay.
Yes, that's the wheel touching the ground.
Mhm. Okay.
So 2 Kings chapter 2, verse 1, and then we'll do verse 11 to 12. It says, when the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven in a whirlwind, Elijah and Elisha
Wait a
were
minute.
on their way to Gilgal.
They got the right one.
Then we jump to verse 11. As they were walking along and talking together, so they're just walking along talking, and suddenly a chariot of fire and horses of fire appeared and separated the two of them. And Elijah went up to heaven in a whirlwind. Elijah saw this and cried out, my father, the chariots and horsemen of Israel. And Elijah saw him no more. Then he took hold of his garment and tore it in two. So Elijah went to heaven in a whirlwind. So we see the whirlwind again, and we see the chariots. So not only did they take Elijah from one spot to another, where did it say it take him?
To heaven.
To heaven. So Elijah rode the chariot to heaven, and he wasn't dead. So Elijah got to ride the chariot from the natural realm to the spirit realm, and he went to heaven while he was still alive.
Oh, the only way to get to heaven is to die?
Well, apparently not.
Oh, okay. Well, for us, right?
That's what I don't know.
Oh.
Unless you got a chariot. Unless you got a chariot.
Well, who
So
came on the chariot to get Elijah?
I don't know if anybody else came with it. They're intelligent. The chariots,
Oh,
these
yeah.
intelligent
So
chariots.
it is suddenly a chariot of fire and horses of fire appeared and separated the two of them.
So chariot of fire and horses of fire came. And took him in the whirlwind.
Horses of fire? What is that?
So, not sure.
Oh, okay.
So it says he mounted the cherubim. So one thought could be that a single cherubim could be considered a horse, or it could be horses of fire, because we did see horses in heaven in Revelation.
Okay.
Could be horses of fire. So we saw that, yeah, you can ascend to heaven. Apparently, while you're still alive, you can ascend to heaven in a chariot. So that's why the term riding the chariot is a term that some people use to talk about ascending to heaven to get to God while you're alive. So it's a term used to describe people ascending to the spirit realm. Okay. So this one gets interesting. So the Hebrew word used for chariot is merkabah. It's a term for any wheeled carriage, vehicle, or wagon, regardless of the number of wheels. The primary characteristic of a chariot is that it has wheels. So the word merkabah or merkava literally translates to chariots of light or chariots of the soul. So then we'll get to the rabbinic warning. So the rabbis, some rabbis believe that it's dangerous to teach on Ezekiel's visions, so they forbade either the reading or expounding of it. Rabbinic orthodoxy tended to discourage speculation on the meaning of Ezekiel's vision. And one great rabbi was quoted saying, no wise man is to share his understanding of the merkabah with a person less enlightened than himself. So this is a forbidden discussion. Forbidden. So there was
Repeat that last word, no man is what?
no wise man is to share his understanding of the merkabah with a person less enlightened than himself.
And so you can't say what a chariot is?
Well,
Or that you like a chariot?
no, it's not supposed to explain your understanding of it, what you understand about it, if a person isn't as enlightened as you. So there's a school or system of Jewish mysticism called Merkabah mysticism. centered around visions of those. Book of Ezekiel chapter 1, or Hekalat Palaces literature, concerning stories of ascents to heavenly places and God's throne. So the central focus of these studies involved the ability to use these chariots to ascend to other spiritual dimensions to heaven. So the rabbinic warning is because people could encounter or cause problems if the students weren't pure of heart or trained properly. So
That just make no sense, though.
it makes no sense.
Right.
Okay.
Because was Elijah fully prepared for that?
Well, Elijah saw the vision.
Oh. So it sounds like he had some understanding then.
We have some understanding, but I think the assumption, though, is also that there's more to it than just what is literally said there.
Mm-hmm.
So basically the thought of if the concept of there's thousands of chariots available and if somebody tries to get a hold of one, then there could be problems.
Yeah, you probably don't want to hijack God's chariot.
Yeah.
It's just not a good plan. No.
Yeah.
So, alright, so we'll leave that one there. And then there were other speculations, kind of what you were leading to. You're saying about how our technology, where did we get our technology from? So, some people say, like where did, we keep getting back to the Egyptians, but like where did the Egyptians learn how to do it, or like the technology? So some think, okay, maybe it came from heaven. And then Ezekiel's vision, it talked about there was a metal object and the cherubim were in it, and they're saying, well, the only vehicle they knew of at the time was a chariot. So people say that, well, any vehicle he saw, he would have called it a chariot. So maybe it wasn't a chariot, maybe it was a metal object, like a ship or a spaceship type of thing. So people are saying that, well, this can explain like where UFO sightings and stuff. It could be these chariots. So they said maybe, because if you look at the description, some say, well, that could be used to describe like the orb type things that are described. If you never seen anything other than a chariot, and the could have had 4 propellers on the bottom of it, and he was calling them. So that's a big stretch there, but but it's just I can't go along with that one. But but it's on the lines of what you're talking about. Just kind of, and where do we get our concepts of stuff from? It could be All right. So in conclusion, so Ezekiel's vision came in a period of history after the temple had been destroyed. So the temple had been destroyed. That's when Ezekiel saw his vision. So after the destruction of the temple, God's appearance to the Israelite and involvement in their lives had diminished. So he wasn't doing all the signs and wonders and showing up for them. So if God dwelt in the temple and the temple had been destroyed, some Jews wondered if this could mean that God was destroyed along with the temple. So Ezekiel's vision of a movable throne chariot brought a message of hope to the Israelites. So God is still alive and he can go anywhere and everywhere. Yeah. So when Ezekiel had his vision and shared it with them, that brought him hope. Okay, God's not dead. He wasn't killed in the temple, and he can exist outside of the temple. He has a throne, a chariot that he can go anywhere from. So he saw that God's throne and the cherubim and the whirling wheels served as a vehicle for God's travel. This vehicle allowed him, as well as Elijah, to travel between heaven and earth. So he saw that the chariots are a gateway between heaven and earth. Other gateways we looked at, methods of crossing between the natural and spiritual realm, were Jacob's ladder, at least for the angels who are ascending and descending upon it. We talked about Jesus, who said angels would ascend and descend upon it. But then also we talked about that Jesus is a method for us to reach God. So it's for us to have contact with the Holy Spirit. So it's for us to ascend. We talked about, in a sense, also Jacob's stone that he had on his head. He named the stone the house of God. So that could be kind of considered a method. And then we looked at the description of Jacob's ladder. The bottom was on earth and the top reached to heaven. And we talked before about the Tower of Babel. So the Tower of Babel, the description was they wanted to build a tower whose top reached to heaven.
Oh, yeah.
So it was basically they wanted to build a gateway to get to heaven. And God wasn't for that, so he destroyed it. And then we also touched on a little bit how someone had mentioned that kind of made them think of the pyramids of Giza. So the Tower of Babel, so there's two ways to look at that. The top reach to heaven could be they thought that they could build it tall enough that it would get to the stars and get past the stars and get up to heaven somewhere. Or they could have thought that they could build a building and on the top of it would be a gateway to get to heaven. So its top reached to heaven. So not necessarily because of the height of it, but just they were going to build a building and its top reached to heaven. So other terms are used for crossing between the natural and spiritual realm. So ascending Jacob's ladder is a term. We talked about going up the mountain of God, because most of the encounters people had with God were on a mountain. You know, Jesus went to a mountain to be with God. Moses encountered him on a mountain. Abraham was on a mountain. Most encounters with God happen on mountains. So going up the mountain of God is a term for ascending into the spiritual realm. Being in the Spirit is a term used in the Bible, talking about ascending to the spiritual realm. And now, riding the chariot. And so that is our lesson, chariots of fire, or riding the chariot. And and so then again we see that Jesus is our method that we seek to reaching God and reaching the spiritual realm. That's the lesson. So let's walk in the way, let's seek the truth, and let's be the light. Good night. I was looking at studying George Washington Carver, the guy who invented peanut butter. Like, that's what they teach you in school. But if you look it up, he invented like...
he invented a lot of peanut stuff.
But not just peanut stuff.
Not just peanut?
Like he had stuff even with the, like Henry Ford, like with cars and all kind of stuff.
Okay.
And he said he talks, it was like, well, how do you, come up with all this stuff? And he says, well, I talk to plants, and the plants tell me. And like, you expect us to believe you talk to plants? And he's like, well, how else would I come up with this stuff? Like, okay. But I don't know about plants, but if
Plants are life.
plants are life, so if it's, it could be inspiration from stuff that actually exists.
Like what type of plants? Where is
I know this Jamaican dude who got inspiration from plants too. I never thought about. I never put those two together.